Welcome to Nerdy Psychology, where your mind's not as messy as it seems. We break it down with a little curiosity and make sense of your thoughts and your themes. So be curious, stay kind, keep your mind nerdy.
Some children learn how to ride a bike. And well, some children learn how to regulate their parents' emotions. And those are very different childhood experiences. Maybe you were the child who had to keep the peace, or had to solve everyone's problems, or had to become the mature one, had to take care of your siblings, or manage the emotions of the adults in your house. You never asked for much or learned that, well, your needs come second. And now, as an adult, you feel exhausted, hyper independent, very uncomfortable asking for help, and somehow you feel completely guilty when you rest for like 14 minutes. Welcome. You may have been a parentified child. And today we're talking about what parentification actually is, how it quietly shapes our adult relationships, and why so many high functioning adults struggle emotionally. Now, healing often begins by realizing you were carrying responsibilities you should have never carried. Let's get nerdy. Hi nerds, welcome to Nerdy Psychology. This is Dr. Angel, and this is where we explore psychology, mental health, and human behavior in ways that are compassionate, relatable, and well, just nerdy enough to keep your brain happy. If you enjoy deep dives into, well, why we do what we do, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Let's dive in. So, what is parentification? Let's put a definition out there. Parentification happens when a child takes on emotional or practical responsibilities that are developmentally inappropriate. In simple terms, the child starts functioning like the adult. And now this can happen in really obvious ways, like a child being responsible for the care of their siblings, or managing household responsibilities, or helping financially, acting as the translator or the caretaker. But emotional parentification is often the invisible one. And that's when the child becomes kind of like the therapist to the adults in their house, or the emotional support system of their house. Maybe they're the mediator. Maybe they're taking on the peacemaking role, or they're being, the little adult. And that child learns other people's emotions are my responsibility. And here's the tricky part: many parentified children are praised for it. People will say things like, oh my gosh, you're so mature, or oh, you're so wise beyond your years, or you're so strong. We can always count on you. And meanwhile, internally on the inside, that child may feel anxious, overwhelmed, invisible, or emotionally lonely, because children are not supposed to carry adult emotional burdens. So, why does this happen? Well, parentification doesn't always come from malicious parents. Sometimes it comes from places of a parent struggling with mental health or addiction, or maybe the household that has chronic illness or financial difficulties. Maybe it's a single parent household, or there's a parent who's had a lot of trauma. Maybe there's just some instability happening. Or maybe a parent's just emotionally a little immature. Or maybe life just seems like it's overwhelming. And sometimes an entire family system unconsciously organizes around that survival. And children adapt incredibly quickly. Children are biologically wired for attachment. So when a child senses the adults in my house are overwhelmed, they often pull to try to become helpful in order to maintain that safety and connection. Because for children, attachment feels like, well, survival. And the problem is when children constantly suppress their developmental needs to care for others, those patterns often follow them into adulthood. So, what does it look like in adult life? And this is where people start suddenly laughing, like when they're watching videos like this. Adults parentified children often become, well, highly competent, dependable, empathetic, hardworking, and emotionally perceptive. But underneath, there's often chronic exhaustion. And many of these adults, well, they just never learned how to receive support, how to identify their own needs, or how to just rest without feeling guilt. So, some common adult patterns include hyper independence. You know, that I'll just do it myself. I got it. I'll take care of it. Not because they want to do everything, but because depending on others once, well, it felt unsafe or disappointing or it didn't happen. They may feel responsible for everyone. They monitor moods constantly. They're like an emotional weather forecaster, and they can walk into a room and they're thinking, this one's upset. This one needs something. And how do I keep everything okay? And they have difficulty relaxing because rest feels uncomfortable or foreign or unsafe. Their nervous systems learn, well, productivity is where my value and worth comes from. I also often see adults that have the people pleasing tendencies because, well, conflict that feels dangerous or emotionally unsafe or volatile. I also see adults who will choose emotionally unavailable people because, well, over functioning, that's what they know. They can take care of it. And some parentified children become adults, well, who are constantly rescuing others, while on their inside, they might be drowning. And many of them look so successful from the outside. So let's talk about grief because grief is something we don't usually talk about with this. But one of the hardest parts from healing from parentification is grieving the childhood that, well, you didn't fully get to have. And that grief can, well, feel confusing because many people, well, love their families very deeply. And I'll hear them say things like, "Oh, man, my family did the best they could." Or my family, I'll hear them say things like, my family did the best they could. And guess what? Both things can be true at the same time. Your caregivers could have loved you and done the best that they could. And you may have carried too much emotionally. Healing is not about blame, it's simply about honesty and acknowledging I adapted to get through. But survival patterns, they don't create peace in adulthood. And honestly, many parentified adults, they even feel guilty just talking about it because they learn very early other people have bigger problems. So they learn to minimize their own pain. I hear this all the time in the counseling room. They'll walk in and I can see they're heavy and they're burdened and there's something that are holding on their heart. And I'll ask about it or check in with them. And I first hear, well, it's really silly or it's stupid or it's dumb. I know all these other people are struggling way more. I hear that because that is what they were trained to learn to do is look out at other people instead of look in at their own experience. And we can't talk about this without talking about the nervous system side because parentified children often, well, they just develop this heightened nervous system sensitivity and their brains become highly attuned to emotional shifts and tone changes and conflict unpredictability and, well, something that could be stressful. And this is why many adults with this history, they feel mentally on all the time. Their nervous systems learn staying alert keeps people safe. And over time, That contributes to, well, anxiety and burnout and perfectionism and exhaustion and difficulty sleeping and chronic stress responses and even health conditions. The body keeps patterns long after the environment changes. And so healing is not just intellectual, it's also nervous system work too. But the good news is awareness changes things, and healing often begins when someone realizes I was surviving in ways that, well, it made sense at the time. Here are some steps to that might help someone on their healing journey. First, therapy. Going to a licensed mental health person in your area and working on this and exploring how what this looks like in your life now. Learning boundaries. Not every emotional problem belongs to you. Practicing how to receive help. This one is so challenging for many parentified adults. Or identifying your own needs and being able to communicate that to others, because a shocking number of people realize, man, I don't even know what I need. Allowing rest. We have done many videos on this and we'll keep saying this. Rest is not laziness. Your nervous system is allowed to exist without having to earn its keep. Another thing you can do is work on developing relationships that have mutual care. Healthy relationships are not built on one person constantly carrying everyone else's emotional weight. And honestly, one of the most healing experiences can simply be being around people who you don't have to be the strong one for all the time. Sometimes the child who looked the most put together was actually carrying some of the heaviest emotional load. And many parentified children become extraordinary adults, empathetic and capable and insightful and protective and deeply caring. And the goal is not to lose those strengths. It's learning that your value does not come from self sacrifice. You're allowed to exist as a human, not just as an emotional support to your worlds. So I would love to hear from you. What's one sign that maybe you realize that maybe you grew up a little too fast? If you feel safe, drop it in the comments below. And if this episode resonated with you, hit the like and subscribe and share it with someone who always feels like they have to hold everything together. And as always, be curious, stay kind, and keep your mind nerdy. That's a wrap.
So be curious, stay kind, keep your